Well, good morning. This is John Lucas. I'm going to do a short little video this morning on how I make my chain ornaments. I put a little chain on there instead of a finial. It makes it a lot faster, and it's kind of unique. People haven't seen that, so they buy them. I buy these little things at Hobby Lobby. I have other things I'll show you later in the video. Going to do nothing but close-up work this morning because I've been told that I have a face for radio. Anyway, what you have to do, you have to start with a square block, perfectly square block. This is about 5 inches long. You do need to find the exact centers if possible. What happens is if you don't get perfectly centered and perfectly square, is your four little square sections end up being smaller. Like this is smaller than that one. This piece wasn't perfectly square. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to just rough it out real quick, not all the way to round. We want to leave flat sides. All I want to do is kind of get it started. And then I'll turn a tenon for my chuck. And I have a Vic Mark chuck which has dovetail jaws. So what I do is I rotate the tool and I swing it out like this, and that allows me to cut my dovetail. And this left side cuts the shoulder, so I end up with a perfect tenon for my Vic Mark chuck. Now, I used a drive center in my chuck. It speeds up the process because I'll be turning a bunch of these today. As long as it's got a shoulder on it, you're okay because it'll butt against that. It won't hurt your Morse taper because the Morse tapers are hardened. So we'll put that in my chuck. Now before I tighten the jaws all the way, I'm going to bring the center back up and make sure it's dead center. There we go. And then tighten this up. Now what I want to leave is about a 3/4 inch to roughly an inch flat area. So now since I'm cutting square sides, I'm going to take it kind of light. That's pretty good. We're going to make it a little bit smaller than that. I'm going to use the wing of my gouge, kind of like a skew. Cut slower, cleaner. It'll make a nicer pass. I won't have to do as much sanding later. That's about right. That's about a little bit less than an inch on there. I'm not worried about this area down there because I'm going to cut that off anyway. Now what I got to decide is where I'm going to have my finial down here. I'm going to make that part. This will leave me enough room to cut my top. So I'm going to take my spindle roughing gouge again and just kind of push it straight in. I'm going to do a somewhat similar up here. I heard some squeaking noise, so I knew my tailstock wasn't tight enough. So I just kind of want to get this out of the way. Then I'm going to switch to a 1/2 inch Thompson spindle gouge. I'm going to raise my tool rest just a hair. The way I like my tool rest height is I want to find out where I'm going to be cutting. I want to be cutting at a little bit above center, right at center. I like to have the handle right at my waist. So I move the tool rest up or down to accommodate those two angles. So I'm going to rub the bevel. I'm going to start my cut. I'm going to raise the speed up just a little bit. Speed is not critical. How fast you push the tool into the work is what's critical. I don't want to push the tool any faster than the wood wants to be cut. I relax my grip. I try to feel the cut. And if I've done it right, I get a cut that's very clean. That's pretty good. It's almost shiny. The other thing that I do, I'm going to cut past that, so I'm going to make some more. When I'm cutting is I try to cut to the right or left of center. The reason I do that is it's more of a shear angle and it's going to leave a cleaner cut than if I cut right across the nose. So right there's my pencil line. So let's start here, and we'll take that down a little faster. Now I got to slow down my feed rate as I get down here because the wood is passing the tool slower. And so in order to not force the cut, I have to slow down. Okay, well, I can get rid of that pencil mark with sanding in a second. So now I'm going to go to this side and do the same thing. Now I may have to waste away a little bit more to give me room to work. I've still got a pencil line. Now I'm pushing down on the tool rest. I'm not pushing into the work. I'm controlling the tool with my body. What I'm doing is I'm watching the back side. I'm watching this side back here. This is like driving a car. When you're driving a car, you don't look at the steering wheel when you go around a corner, you look at the corner. So by looking out here and controlling the tool with my body, I can swing it and get the exact cut that I want. The other thing you may have noticed, as I went down the cut, as I get close to the bottom, I'm rotating the tool. And the reason I'm doing that is now when it bumps into that bottom, it doesn't cut, it doesn't catch. So let's see if I've gotten rid of my lines. I got a smidgen right there and a smidgen right there. This one doesn't have a perfect cut, and I can get rid of that, so we'll make one more pass. Again, I'm rubbing the bevel. I rotate the tool slightly, so I'm cutting at about 11 o'clock. I'm controlling it with my body. I'm pushing down on the tool rest. I'm letting the tool cut. I'm not pushing, I'm not forcing it. Now as I get down here, now I came out of the cut, and the reason I came out of the cut was I wasn't watching it carefully. Cut that. All right, let's go back to this side. I think I've got all that pretty good. Yes, I do. Good and smooth. All right, so we'll pull the tailstock away. I'm going to shape my tenon. And my finial, I guess you could call this. We'll slow down right there, let it cut. Okay. Now when you start the cut right here, it's easy to get a kickback. If you'll start with the flute pointing at 3 o'clock, it won't kick back, and you can start that cut. Then if I need to, I can open up the tool and finish the cut. So we'll start it like that. We'll rotate it. Now always cut downhill. So I'm cutting high point to low point. There we go. Got just the slightest bump right there. There we go. Now what I'm going to do in order to start my drill bit more accurately, I'm going to start it with the toe of the skew. Let's get a starter hole. Now I'm going to take the drill bit in my tailstock drill chuck. This is a 7/64 drill. You'll have to do a little test. The chain that you use might be thinner, might be thicker. So drill a little test hole in something to find out which hole you have to actually drill. 7/64 is a hair big, but what that does is it makes it a little bit easier to get chain in there. Sometimes if I get too much CA on, it makes the chain bigger. So now I want to start cutting the top. Start very gently. Now, even though I'm not pointing directly at, we'll call that 9 o'clock, if I open it up a little bit, but I start the cut very gently, just to get a shoulder established. Once I have that shoulder established, it's not going to kick back on me, and I can be a little more aggressive in my cut. So I want cut down there, go back in, we'll make another light pass. I'm going to round that over just a little bit. Now I want to round this over for my top. That's good. That's good enough for now. Now we're going to stop and sand. I'll turn my dust collector on, which won't be too obnoxious, I hope. I've cut pretty clean, so I can probably sand with 220. I'm going to slow the tool down, the wood down. And the reason I do that is it's very much like driving across a pothole. You drive across a pothole at 70 miles an hour, you never hit the bottom. You always hit the tops. Well, we want to be able to sand out any defects that are below center. So by slowing it down, the sandpaper will drop into those holes. It'll get rid of your tear out, get rid of any sanding marks. Now I'm being fairly light going across here. Gonna round that corner off right there just a little more. Okay. Then I want to sand these areas. Usually I'll run the wood through the jointer or the planer so I don't have to sand these much. I did not do that this morning. We're going to cover most of that area with my details. These two sides actually did go through the jointer earlier. So we'll just be a little more aggressive on those two sides right there. That's pretty good. Got one spot. This one's got a bad area right there. There we go. And I go to 320. Sand these areas lightly. I'm not using a lot of pressure, particularly out here, because this is fairly small and I could break it off. It's about 3/8 of an inch. Sometimes I go smaller. Now I touch it lightly to get rid of the sanding dust. I want to look at it and see where I'm at before I go to 400. Got some real slight marks right there, some real slight marks right there, but other than that, and a little bit right in the bottom of that cove. So we'll just sand those a little more aggressively with the 400. If I had to, I'd go back to 220 or even 180 if it was necessary. I find sanding to be extremely important in the quality of my work. So I check it pretty carefully. That's looking pretty good. Let's go to 600. That's and that. Through there. And you notice I forgot to sand these with 400. So we'll do those real quick with 400 and 600. Go. Now the next thing I do, I use for my Christmas ornaments, I use a product called Krylon Triple Thick Crystal Clear Glaze. Makes a great finish. If I don't do anything to it and all I do is spray it with this, it takes 5 to 8 coats to get a good build. If I use thin lacquer, I take regular lacquer, I thin it 50-50, and I wipe that on. It will only take maybe 2 coats of the trickle thick to get the kind of finish I want. It's a little bit challenging to use that finish. Takes some practice. If you use too much, you get runs. If you don't use enough, you get sort of a textured kind of finish. So you have to play a little game. Squirt really lightly from a certain distance and try to do that repeatably so that you can learn how to do it. When I've been making quite a few ornaments, usually after the first 5 or 6 or so, I get to where I can spray them maybe twice and get a perfect finish. You can use sanding sealer if you don't have any of this lacquer. I keep the lacquer around because I use it a lot of times when you have punky wood and you want to harden the wood. So now we'll put this back on. We drilled our hole. I'm going to take a skew. You could probably, I have enough room in there. Well, we'll just do it with a spindle gouge. Sometimes I don't leave myself enough room on the top end, and I can't get a spindle gouge in there because when I start cutting this way, it wants to hit that wood. So we'll just take off a little more wood, and I'll cut really lightly. Go back and give myself some clearance. Take another light cut. Now I'm going to hold this end with my fingers back there, real gently. It's going to break off this time, probably. Right about there. Keep going. Push. There we go. Then I'll just carve off this little bad area. Now, if I took really light cuts and you actually burnish the wood with the bevel, you don't really have to go back and sand that. What I can do is put a little finish on. And usually nobody but me worries about the looks of that. Now what we do is, I want to create a little hole right in the center. I take whatever kind of sharp tool I've got, center punch or whatever, and I put a little starter hole. And then I take my Dremel, and a number 67 drill bit works fine for the hangers that I use. I drill that. Now let me clear some of this away so I can show you the next part of the demo. Bring this stuff over here. What I'm going to do is I use these hangers. I buy them at Hobby Lobby. They're for making jewelry, and they come fairly long. And being the cheap guy that I am, I cut it off, put this one back in the bag, and then I take this side and I rebend it. And I get 2 out of 1. Now I'm going to cut this off. It's a little bit long. Cut that off. Then I test fit it to make sure. Sometimes I don't get the hole drilled just right, or you get a little burr on the end of this and it won't go in there. Then I take my medium CA glue, I put a little down in the tube, and I kind of just dip this in there. Got a little bit too much, but that's okay, we'll drip off. Slide it in here, clean that up, and that's got my hanger portion. Now, normally what I'll do, once I get this done, this is when I'll go back and I'll spray it with the Krylon, get the finish that I want on it. And so we'll bring this up, and then I add the chain. Now to put the chain on, One of the problems I run into, let's turn the dust collector off, is that it's hard to put that in that hole. Tell a story, there's a country boy dragging a chain down a road, and a city boy drives by in a car, and he stops and he says, "Why are you dragging that chain?" Country boy says, "You ever tried to push one of these things?" Well, that's what we run into here. It's very hard to get it in that hole. So what I do is, I get some accelerator, I get my CA glue, and I drip a little on this chain, like that. And then I spray it with accelerator. And then for some reason, with my accelerators not working as good lately, I have to wait longer than I usually do. There we go. Now I have a stiff chain. It's very easy to put it in that hole. And that's why I was saying sometimes you have to take a measurement. The CA glue will build up on there and you won't be able to get it down in the hole. So you may have to drill a little bit larger hole. But what I do is I put a little bit down here, if I can. Sometimes it's hard to get it started. Then I'll run a little bit along my chain. Then I'll spray both of them with CA accelerator. And I'll slide this in there. Wipe off any excess. And it'll dry pretty quickly. Now, then I want to cut the chain off to the length I want. We're going to say about there. And then I use these charms. You can get all kinds of charms. I like to use the crosses on Christmas ornaments. They sell well. For not Christmas season, I'll use other little charms. You can buy all kinds. The little hearts have been popular. The little birds have been popular. This one says handmade, which I kind of like. So I take my pliers and I open up this hole. And then this can be a little challenging sometimes. It's kind of like threading a needle. But you get that in your fingers. And you got to grip it differently. My pliers were too close to the edge. So I grip it and get it started in that hole, in that chain. Well, I almost had it. Oh, I don't have the gap. There we go. And then you squeeze it back together. And what I like to do is flex it just a little bit so it combines. And then the ornament's basically ready to go. Here's one that's finished. What you can do then is you can get these buttons. These are little buttons that I buy from Walmart. What I'll do is I'll carve the back off. And sometimes you have to put a little CA on these little holes because once you carve the button off, it comes apart. But I glue those down. Those sell really well, but they cost me a little bit more. So I have to charge a little more for my ornaments. These, the cats and the dogs sell really well. They're inexpensive, these stick-on ones. So I can sell these for about $25 pretty regularly. You can buy the Christmas-oriented pieces. You can get all kinds of things at Hobby Lobby. That's all I've got left right now. I've run out of them. But that's the finished ornament. And I sell this tile ornament around here for $25. If I use the buttons, I sell those for $25. I sell these for $20. If I make the ornament without any decoration, just like this, then I sell those for $15. And they go pretty well for me. Anyway, I hope you enjoy this. Hope you learned a little bit from it. So I'll see you on the next video.